Good afternoon and welcome to Right Now. I'm Chris Reddy. We have as our co-host in studio with us this afternoon, Curtis Ayler. Mike DeSonia is not with us this afternoon. He's going to try and make it here later on, but he'll be back with us next week for sure. We are now back into our programming following our Thanksgiving break. We do have another guest in studio with us that we're going to get to in just 1 minute. But for those of you that are listening, we can confirm this on YouTube later on. But I am dressed up for the holidays. I do not.
Are you ever?
I do not feel a whole lot of holiday cheer in the room from the rest of my guests and producer here. So to kind of help the listeners and us all get into some holiday cheer as part of our programming today, we are going to sprinkle in a little bit of Christmas trivia here from time to time. Okay?
Now, I did hear about the Christmas trivia before we got the show. You did coach me in the Christmas trivia. The dress up, not so much. So I don't know.
Oh, well,
Chris.
let me explain to you what I have on here for you guys. I am right now wearing my Dr. Seuss Christmas hat, straight from the Whoville department store, and I am wearing my Christmas kitten blazer. Bright red, covered in baby kittens.
You'll eat it up on YouTube,
it's better.
You'll eat it right up.
This is better than the ugly Christmas sweater. I think we have to go with the crazy Christmas blazers from now on. So we're going to do that.
Start a new trend.
Yep. The guest that we have in studio with us is appearing for his second time on Right Now, and that is Aaron Bowman. He is from the town of Mansfield. He is also one of our state central representatives for the 29th Senatorial District in Connecticut. Welcome to the show again, Aaron.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. Great to be back here.
Yeah, I'm glad that you can make it here this afternoon. We do have some news to follow up on just quickly, and I think you're going to talk about this in more detail in just a few minutes, but I'm going to kind of preview that by saying that one thing that was missed in the past 2 weeks that we've been off the air and that we talked about in our last show before Thanksgiving was the special session and specifically the Housing Bill 8002. One thing that happened over the course of Thanksgiving and specifically the day before Thanksgiving, the busiest travel year of the day, while everybody else is doing something besides paying attention to what's going on in Hartford, Governor Lamont signed 8002 into law.
Yes, he did.
Kind of little sneaky tactic there. We aren't surprised since this one took a whole lot of controversy back at the beginning of the year.
It did.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going to talk about that in some more detail in just a few minutes because we are expecting a special caller to join us shortly.
Yes.
But first, we do have some Wyndham update with Curtis Ayler. Go ahead, Curtis.
Hey, so here we are in the town of Wyndham. We just started our new session. We have our new town council. They've met for a couple of times now, and we just want to make sure that we're making the listeners aware of what's going on, the trends that are happening here in the town of Wyndham, what's important to the town council, and how it's going to affect the listeners here. There's a big brainstorming session this week on Tuesday with the town council. This is a new thing that they're doing. They're doing study meetings. That's an additional meeting that they're doing every month in addition to their business meetings. And what came out of that is going to be a theme of this year between the town employees and the town council. So get ready, everyone. Is a focus on blight. Now, Chris, you were saying that's a common theme in many areas, many regions here around.
Yeah, we actually went through something similar just this past year with our first selectman in the town of Scotland who had to write up a blight policy. I think that this is a directive that kind of came from the COGS. This is something that has been talked about now for a while, that there should be some standardization or, way of each town having their own blight ordinance. And they did leave the discretion to each of the individual towns, as we saw in the town of Scotland. So I'm interested to hear what now some of this planning for blight ordinances in the town of Wyndham. Have you had any kind of knowledge as to what the plan might be?
Oh, well, we have knowledge of what the plan has been in the past.
I think we're all kind of aware of it.
We have lots of history here in town of Wyndham with how we enforce blight. What we've seen historically in the town of Wyndham is it's a small town, and we're known as a one-party sort of town. So blight enforcement here in Wyndham has historically been the powers that be. They pick 2 or 3 landlords that they decide are public enemy number one, and they throw the book and they selective enforce while walking right by and keeping their eyes closed. Hear no evil, see no evil on the rest of the properties here in town. So that's how we've been historically. Now, what I'm not hearing about any refocus here in town on redoing our blight ordinance.
Okay.
Which, like you had mentioned, we ought to be looking at to align with the way that the state's going. What I'm looking at is the town employees trying to find something that will lift up all their spirits, because they're a little bit down in the dumps from the budget season last year, from the reorganization that's happening in town hall, and the upcoming budget tsunami that we'll be experiencing in a couple of months.
I remember you saying that.
So this is something that the town manager has cooked up with the department heads that will get them all motivated. So this is something that they're looking at as a holistic sort of approach, a multi-department approach, and it's going to be one of those devils are in the details sort of things. This is why we're talking about this right now. We really want to make sure that the public is aware of this, of the focus of the town hall. We want to try to get the public out at these meetings and putting in their input, because we don't really want to see the blight program being a bully program here in town. We all agree. We all look around our downtown Willimantic, our town of Windham. There are problem properties. Some of them are owned by the town themselves. The town hall is in pretty rough shape. But we want to make sure that the town is aware. But hey, did I hear that we have a caller in?
Well, yeah. Before we get on the phone with our caller right now, we want to introduce Aaron again, and specifically, he is here because he's been trying to put together some informational sessions regarding the Housing Bill 8002. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really going to affect all the 169 towns in Connecticut. This housing bill that just got pushed through, and the first time they put it up there, it got vetoed, with the 5002. So our caller, Betsy McCaughey, who was the former lieutenant governor of New York, she also lives in Connecticut, and she said she would come out and talk to the RTC. So I said, hey, listen, I'm going to take you up on that. I'm going to put something together on the 29th, being the state central representative out here with Chris Coyle. And so we threw something together really quick. So next Wednesday, December 17th, we are going to have a meeting at the Mansfield Library in the Buchanan Center. Seating is very limited, so if anybody's interested, I'll get my contact information out there. But Betsy's going to come. She's going to speak to the crowd. We also have Tim Ackerts, who's coming out to speak, and a few others.
State representative.
Yep, state representative. I actually reached out to State Representative Pat Boyd, who was a Democrat, but he actually voted against this, seeing that he's in the 50th district, and it's really going to put a lot of stress on the smaller rural communities when it comes to the infrastructure that needs to be put in place.
Great.
So I believe we have Betsy on with us right now. So
welcome to the show, Betsy. Thank you so much for joining
thank you.
us.
I'm so glad you invited me to join you, and I hope many people who are listening to us will show up at the Mansfield Library, because this law will wreck your neighborhood, wreck your little town, and it will force property taxes, which are already way too high, to soar even more, because small towns will be forced to pay for sewer lines and water lines and infrastructure that they have not had to pay for in the past. This law literally it's very threatening to people who live in small towns. It says if you've worked your whole life to save up to buy a single-family home in a quiet neighborhood, you can't have that. The government's now going to come in and say, we're going to put an affordable housing complex next to you, or even a trailer park.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining us. And if you could just talk a little bit more about what you are going to come out and speak to everybody about next Wednesday in Mansfield, because clearly this is something that is very important to Eastern Connecticut, since we are predominantly small rural towns that will directly be affected by this. Can you just give them a little preview of what...
I'm so glad you asked me.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked me, because really the media have not covered this law fairly or completely, and so people are unaware of what it will actually do to their home values, to the quality of their life, and especially to their property taxes.
Right.
But the bill, now a law, empowers the government to dictate that as much as 20% of the housing in a town, 20%,
Wow.
That's a huge number, 1 out of every 5 housing units, all for the sake of what they call economic diversity,
Right.
as if that's the government's job, right?
Yeah.
So the state is going to say every town must have a certain percentage of housing for the very, very poor, and then another percentage of housing for the poor, and then another percentage for the lower middle class, like a cookie-cutter template. And it's going to put enormous stress on these small towns that are not equipped for aggregate living, for apartment complexes that require sewer and water lines and bus lines and more seats in the schools.
Certainly. And that's absolutely a problem that we have in Eastern Connecticut is because we do not have mass transit access like that in many of these small towns. This is, I agree with you wholeheartedly that this is something that is going to affect all of us in the very near future. So I'm glad that you're providing us with this information, and I do hope that we have a great turnout next Wednesday. Do you want to talk, Aaron, a little bit more about what you're expecting from this event on Wednesday night?
It's going to be great having Betsy coming out here and bringing awareness along with hopefully a few other state representatives, because, a lot of the verbiage in this bill, like they'll throw around the words affordable housing. Well, there's nothing in the bill that I've seen that maybe I'm wrong, maybe Betsy, you can correct me, that has to do with affordable housing. It's all about density, all about mandating density and clusters and building up. And again, like for me, I worry about Mansfield because of the university. We do technically have mass transit because we have the bus line that runs through there. What is that going to do to our community? We don't have our own sewage treatment plant. We don't have public water. We have certain parts in town, but we don't have our own sewage. That all goes through UConn.
Yep.
So what happens when UConn becomes overwhelmed and they can't take literally any more of our garbage and says, hey, you have to go build something? Now, that's going to put a huge impact on, not just us, but other small towns that run into that. And I heard Betsy on the radio, and I tried my darndest to get in contact with her because I said, listen, I watch her on Newsmax, and she's going to come up here and say she'll talk to the RTCs. As a state representative for the 29th Senate District for State Central, I feel it's not just my duty to facilitate this, to put this together, because this affects the people on the Democratic side, this affects the Republicans, this affects the unaffiliated voters, the independent voters. So it's not just like this is a Republican thing. This is, hey, we need to get this information out, and I really can't thank Betsy McCaughey enough to come out here and do this. I really appreciate her taking the time because, like she said, this isn't being covered on Channel 3 or the local news. Right. I've seen more coverage of it on Newsmax than I have anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's right. I've covered it every week on my Sunday morning show because I think it is so important. I always have a segment that deals with Connecticut, and I'm going to do that again this Sunday. And people really need to know. And, of course, we all want affordable housing, but the affordable housing is urgently needed in some of the cities. And
Correct.
If the purpose of this law were to increase affordable housing, they would be putting it in those cities because the land is cheaper there than in some of these towns, and because the infrastructure is already there, the sewers and the water lines and the bus lines, everything that's needed to accommodate high-density housing. But the purpose of this law is a little different. It's really to poke you in the eye. It's economic diversity, whether you want it or not. And some towns just are not ready for this kind of housing.
Yeah. Yep, and that's exactly what we're seeing out here in Eastern Connecticut. So we're really looking forward to you coming out here and talking to the people in our towns about the Housing Bill 8002. One quick thing that I want to talk to Aaron about was that I recently was looking at some information about the standard. The new apartments that just went in for housing around UConn, just north of the Four Corners, intersection 195 and 44.
Yeah.
That has a designated percentage of apartments that were considered affordable or workforce housing.
Right.
And I recently heard that in November, 85% of those are vacant.
They are, and I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but I believe for a one-bedroom, I think it's just shy of $1,300 a month is what they're considering affordable housing. I mean, that's kind of a little bit higher. And again, we know that the subsidies don't work. We need to have, we need to have the housing, obviously, but we need to make it where home ownership is the goal and not continuous subsidies from the government to be on Section 8. Just like the SNAP benefits, everybody was up in arms about that, but that was supposed to be a hand up, not a handout, not a way of life. And we've become so dependent on the government, we've forgotten how to do things ourselves. And you're right, a lot of that stuff at the Standard is vacant. In downtown stores, most of the housing there is all UConn housing. It's all rented out to UConn students. UConn actually foots the bill. And with the downtown stuff, there's a lot of open lease space for businesses, restaurants, and stuff. And I think with this housing bill, you're going to see stuff like that get converted to housing. And it's it's not going to be for families. It's going to end up, especially in Mansfield, it's going to be for students. But
plus, when you convert the commercial properties to residential, you'll lose a lot of the tax base. And then the town has to go and raise the property taxes as a result. And that's going to clobber everybody. We can't allow property taxes to get so high that living in a single-family home is unaffordable.
Right, and that's exactly where we're heading to. At what point is New Jersey going to be laughing at us because we have the highest property taxes in the nation? I think we don't
want to look like New Jersey. We do not want to look like New Jersey.
Exactly.
And, we're fortunate in Eastern Connecticut.
I got to go now. I got to hop.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Betsy. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Now we're fortunate that there's plenty of communities in Central Connecticut that's the butt of the joke. That's the New Jersey of Connecticut.
Yeah.
Eastern Connecticut, we're very fortunate that we've kept our rural standard of living, our rural way of life. This is really serious stuff. This 8002 bill that just got signed by the governor the day before Thanksgiving when nobody could.
Insidious.
Nobody paying attention.
That's right.
So joining us in studio right now is the other half of the duo of our state central representatives for the 29th district, Chris Coyle from the town of Pomfret, the RTC chair. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
Great to be here in this lavish studio. I'll tell you what, very impressive. Chris, all of us, look, right now, our government's going around the world with a policy called trade, not aid. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea is that we help countries help themselves step back up. Right. So we look at this in what we all know is critical out there, which is context. Mm-hmm. So let me give you a couple numbers to set the context. How did this problem come about? Or what are some of the elements we might look at to suggest that created this problem, thus perhaps could help solve it?
Yeah.
So I want to run some numbers by you, okay?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Roughly 3,500 homeless or unhoused. The number shifts around.
Yep.
Right? Illegal immigrants in Connecticut, last time I looked, was 167,000.
Yes.
Someone told me over 200,000. So put these numbers in contrast. 3,500 people can't find a place to live. Mm-hmm. Now, we're not going to get into how many of those are already on assistance programs. Leave that. Of those, call it 200,000 illegal immigrants, we know that $1.7 billion was spent on these illegal immigrants in Connecticut last year.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So now, just do any research you want. Across the nation, these people who find it hard to rent or buy will tell you that they feel illegal immigrants have basically sucked up the housing market. So where do we think these 167 people are living?
Right.
More, how do you think they're affording to live there? Mm. So the government's created the problem. They've created over-regulation, over-tax. And so a developer has to pay all sorts of taxes, and they're not letting the market work. So I think we've got to really step back. Mm-hmm. Chris, I know you're going to get into the damage this could do to our communities, but people are just put their heads around and ask their state reps, could you please explain to me the problem?
And we talked about this for a couple of episodes before our break for Thanksgiving, and specifically on some of the details of 8002 as it was going into special session when we first heard about it, and then right afterwards. And like you said, the real concern here, and we talked about this a couple of times in this past week, is that they're looking for, like you said, this idea of density, of growth in housing, of capacity in your town, of housing that's going on here. And the fact that now you're giving the ability for a developer to come in and pick and choose from a list that you've created yourself of developable sites in your town that they get to say, this looks like one that I think I can make work and make it profitable for me, but it's a developer that has no connection to these communities.
Right.
These are people that are simply coming in for an investment, and nothing ties them to the communities that they are now damaging.
Aaron, 100%. I'm thinking about it, guys. Aaron and I were talking about this. Government creates problems and then runs to you and says, let us help solve it. Let me give you one quick example. all the people listening are opening their electric bill for November, December, and there's a surcharge in there. Ever notice the people running this state don't talk about it because they did it? Now, our great representative Pat Boyd is on TV or on the newspaper in our community offering energy assistance. So you create the problem and then give away more taxpayers' money to solve the problem. Folks, federal government's been in housing before. It was called HUD. They ripped those suckers down all over the country. It didn't work. The people didn't want to live there. It was terrible.
Yeah. We're coming up to our first commercial break in just a few minutes, and we're going to talk about this more because one of the things I had planned for our second segment was actually to start to get into some of the fraud that's starting to be uncovered these past 2 weeks across the nation, whether it's between Medicaid, housing, as you started to discuss, Chris, SNAP benefits. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes here, but I did promise that we were going to get into a little bit of Christmas trivia right at the beginning of the show before you arrived. That's why I was commenting on my attire here, and that we had very other little Christmas cheer here. So let me ask you this first, Aaron. In your household, which is the bigger event, Christmas Eve or Christmas morning?
It used to be Christmas Eve when I was a kid because my aunt in Ellington used to host Christmas Eve. Then after my grandparents passed, things kind of changed a little bit. For us, I got to say, it's probably 50-50. Like, we do the one president night, and then everybody wakes up. And, I have 5 kids, for the listeners who don't know. My oldest is 18. My youngest is 10 now. So there's still a little bit of that, hey, I got to talk to the big man talk, for presents. But I think Christmas morning is probably when we're all together, all 7 of us, it's nuts. It's nuts. It's bonkers.
And I think it's a general consensus. A lot of people, really do the Christmas morning. But I only said that because I was thinking today, actually, as I was preparing for the show and doing some of these Christmas trivia questions and stuff, that I had a very unusual circumstance in my neighborhood growing up where we had a family that did everything on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Presents, the dinner, everything. And then they slept in Christmas morning.
Hey, I like the sound of that.
And the youngest son was the one that I was friends with, and he had 2 older sisters that were significantly, like 7 or 8 years older than him. And he would, be up early Christmas morning, calling me on the phone, and we'd be talking about stuff we got. And I'm like, oh, come over, we'll play with this, play with that. He'd be like, no, I can't. Everybody's still asleep. And I'm like, God, I've been up for like 3 hours already. Like,
do you have a time for one quick Christmas story if you want?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a good one.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Go ahead.
If you've got kids in the room, you don't want to spoil the joy for them, then you might want to block their ears. But so there was the one year, my brother's 4 years younger than me, my brother Eli, and we were fighting like cats and dogs. We were having wrestling matches. We were holes in sheetrock, like drove my parents crazy. Well, we knew my dad and my parents would hide presents in the house, and usually it was in the old Jag, and we ended up finding the receipts one year, so we knew what we were getting. My mother, God bless her, she's living down in Florida now where it's a little bit more red, she got so mad. Santa never showed Christmas morning. It was the year that Santa never came, and that was like, she was like, oh yeah, you guys want to have fun? You guys want? Guess what? Santa's not coming this year.
Christmas is canceled.
It was rough. That was a rough Christmas, but it was one of those things where you don't realize how much trouble you cause as a kid sometimes, and you think it's funny, and we're like, oh yeah, I bet Santa's going to bring me this, and they're like, how do they know what he's? Oh, well, we found the receipt in the bedroom, and that was it. Put the kibosh on Christmas.
So we have 2 categories for Christmas trivia today that we can do. One is Christmas carols. The other is Christmas history, or related to Christmas history. Which one would you like to try and take a stab at here, Aaron? Everybody can answer after we give Aaron the first choice. So.
If it was something National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, I'd be able to answer it. So let's do carols.
Okay. In what song are people dressed in holiday style, children are laughing, and people are passing?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. I don't think that's right.
I guess. Anybody else want to try?
Oh, I hear it in my head, but not until I get to the chorus. It fades out before I get to the chorus. I couldn't tell you.
Any guess, Chris?
Stump.
Silver Bells.
That's it.
Bells.
I was thinking that. Yeah. I wasn't positive,
and
though.
You're right. The tune. Once you do the tune, you get that.
No, exactly. So we'll have a couple more here. We're coming up to the end of our first segment here. This is Right Now on 1400 AM, 95.3 FM, WILI. Welcome back to Right Now. I'm Chris Reddy. In studio, I have my co-host Curtis Ayler with us, and I also have both of our state central representatives representing the 29th Senatorial District of Connecticut, Aaron Bowman and Chris Coyle. We have been talking about Housing Bill 8002 before our break during the first segment, and we're going to continue a little bit of that discussion right now. Specifically, Chris, I wanted to get a little bit of more input from you. You kind of ended our first segment there talking about the housing bill and its effect on some of these small towns in eastern Connecticut. Would you like to continue the conversation for us?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. And you'll hear Aaron and I promote this a lot. Our event next week with someone who's lived this in New York State. And I understand we're going to have various representatives, state
Correct.
representatives. So as we all know in life, we've got to peel back the onion. We have to understand the problem. Mm-hmm. And why we feel so passionate about this, Aaron and I, is we want to empower people to ask good questions. Doesn't matter right or left. Facts and truth are bipartisan. They're nonpartisan.
True. Right.
And since it's your money in your wallet, you need to know what to ask.
What about common sense? Is common sense?
Yeah, common sense goes in there. So let's start with just a couple. You heard me throw out some numbers, but one of the things we were talking, guys, during the break about was context. So we are in the fourth most expensive state in the nation for a reason, right?
Yep.
Businesses are leaving. The wonderful Yankee Institute has a chart they put over here. Chris knows it well.
We talked about this.
That shows the population. That line, by the way, folks, is declining. Yeah. And over the last couple of years has taken a further dip, acceleration of decline. And it shows the budget, a red line, going the opposite direction, like one of these cartoons.
How does that work?
Yeah, and so that gap of population and cost tells you everything. So we started by saying, before you worry about affordable housing, what about making Connecticut affordable? Think about this, folks that are listening. Would you buy a house where you couldn't afford the property taxes, you couldn't afford the electricity, you couldn't afford to live in the house? And Eric was just pointing out some of these apartments over where he is, $500,000 to build an apartment.
Right. And they consider that affordable.
So this is called a circular firing squad, folks.
Yes.
And the common denominator, it's your money being taken every year, more and more, and told, don't worry, we're fighting for you. And what everyone listening has to say is, well, who's you? And what does fighting for me mean? And Chris, you brought a point. Yeah. Let's get into some of the details of how this would affect the parking up on the hill here.
Sure. Yeah.
Or these rural towns, what this means about allowing homeless to pretty much use public space.
So we started talking about the parking ban, or the enforcement of a parking ban of units of 16 or less, and how that was one of the changes from the original wording of this legislation. It originally had been for 24 units or less that you did not have to provide off-street parking for those tenants. And that has changed, but if you still think about what this would do to communities, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, a lot of our roads are not designed for that type of parking, then driving. These are, some of these city streets here were originally designed for horses and carts.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Not cars, and not 4 cars wide with 2 parked on either side and then 2 driving down the middle. Very simply, that's a safety hazard. I mean, you can't get emergency vehicles in there. You have problems with pedestrians trying to cross. I mean, this is just looking at that alone and bypassing one of those major hazards that every developer struggles with in Connecticut in these types of construction developments is something that is just going to create a huge issue for many of these small towns. What are you going to do when you have thousands of cars that now need parking, and in the wintertime we now have to come through and plow?
Yeah, right.
Well, we already see that here. In the studios we're here in Willimantic, Connecticut. We already see that here in our hill section of Willimantic, Connecticut. Now, up on the hill here in town, we already have a whole lot of college houses. And those college houses all have students, and every student now has a car, apparently. The trope of the poor college kid is out the window. They all drive a nicer car than me, and that's fine. Good for them.
They do. There's a lot of nice Porsches in Mansfield that belong to college students.
So every one of these kids owns a car now, and they all live in a 3-decker up here on the hill in Willimantic, Connecticut. Now you go ahead and you tell me with a straight face that when college is in session, You drive up any one of these streets in Willimantic in the Hills section. You drive up Walnut, you drive up North, you drive up Church. Go ahead and tell me that you can drive two-way traffic with these kids parked on the road, on both sides of the road, all day long, all night long. Tell me that you can drive two ways on there. Now tell me that you can even fit through one way when there's snow on the ground. This is already a problem we see in Willimantic, and that is in an environment where we do have regulations that say how many parking spots we need for apartment buildings. Go ahead and pull any of those little vestiges of parking regulation away. What's going to happen to this town?
All right. Well, you guys brought up the standard in Mansfield, and they've got a garage that I'm convinced eventually is going to sink because they built that whole thing on a swamp. But you have Hops 44 right there,
right,
toast.
Yep.
I was talking to one of the owner over at Hops, and there's cars being parked in that parking lot overnight because the parking garage is full. Students are having friends over. There's nowhere to park, so now they're parking somewhere else. And it's like, well, you've created this monster of the standard, and we didn't take into consideration people might have guests over.
A trailer.
Where are they going to park?
That's right.
And you're right. It's one of those things. Like there's another spot in front of town hall. They're putting in quote unquote calming street measures. They put a big speed bump in, and you've had people in the fire department like, yeah, good luck if a car breaks down. We're not going to get an apparatus, and it's not like there's a lot of ways around it.
Right.
So again, it's a lot of knee-jerk reaction. Let's try to fix something without actually looking at, does this really need to be fixed? We live in a college town. We have the Yukons in our backyard. I was young once. I sped in my 20s. Kids speed. There's somebody online today complaining that, I got passed on a double line. Listen, you're in a college town. It's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And to your point is, where are you going to park everybody when it starts snowing?
Yeah.
Especially in the Mansfield downtown area.
Yep.
There's already a congestion. And if you talk to most of the residents that live in the area, they avoid 195 while school's in session. Everybody takes Codfish, Chaffeeville,
absolutely.
any other way around to get to that side of town because there's already so much congestion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And now they're just going to add more to it with this one-size-fits-all housing mandate, and it strips the local zoning away. It strips away their right to say, hey, this is what we're going to have here, this is what we're not. It's all that as of right housing language.
Yeah, and we talked about that a couple weeks ago on the show that this really goes against that idea that Connecticut is home rule.
Right.
We no longer have home rule.
No.
I'm like, this is very
That's what's
simply
so insidious about it.
And what is the point of even electing planning and zoning commissions whose job as the local authority to oversee development in the town is just taken away
Chris,
from them?
The beauty of this, folks, if you notice the way this is wrapped, it's wrapped in a virtuous layer cake that says, if you're against this, you're against the unhoused, you're not for affordable housing. So it is this idea that your independence, your right to independence in your town and self-rule and self-determination is subservient to our right to tell you how to live. Mm-hmm. And folks, I got a history lesson for you. Central planning has not worked anywhere in the world. It's led to billions of people starving to death, and it's not working here. Do you think how many of these people who voted for this employ people, have jobs, and have businesses? I will near guarantee you the majority that voted for this on that side of the aisle, not many of them.
Yeah.
But they're big on policy. Mm-hmm. None of it ever tested. None of it. And so, what we've learned, and we're going to hear Aaron next week at our event, there are people, private homeowners, farmers, who have litigated successfully against these laws. Because if you think about it, what is taking? What is the taking of private property? Well, if I mandate certain conditions that lower the value of your property, I haven't taken your property per se, but haven't I? I've taken away its value, the nature of the community. What do they say in real estate? Location, location, location. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what, folks? Your location value is about to drop.
Right.
Well, luckily, though, I got to said some good news on this. Mm-hmm. Luckily, like this, the hope is since Lamont is running for a third term, he says he's going to fix this stuff finally. I mean, he's had 2 terms to do it before, but now he's actually going to fix it.
Don't you love that? They'll create the problem, and it's like our energy thing. Call us for energy assistance in the most expensive electric state in the union.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And why is it so? Why is it one of the most expensive electric states in the union?
Because of the tax surcharge.
That's right.
That's right. And what is that for? Very similar, guys, to the housing bill. We're going to tell you, we're not going to let the market work, that solar and wind are our deemed electric cars, and we're going to put this money supposedly toward that.
Oh, and it's not just solar and wind and electric cars. There's a lot of social programs that are being paid for with this public benefits.
Paying for the electric bills of the people who couldn't pay for them. Do you think those are the same people who want the rent lower? Now we're getting there.
You're starting to see that in all the blue states, that renewable portfolio standards are what's driving up the cost of electricity at a faster rate than anything else. Like, bottom line is that this is what it's legislation that is causing this problem.
Hidden tax, and unaccountable policy. None of us voted for this.
No. And even this housing bill, there was no public comments. Nobody could come in and voice their opinion or do a Zoom and say, hey, I'm against this, and here's why. It was, hey, guess what? In the middle of the night, we're going to push this through, and then I'm going to sign it, and now it's law. And it's a shame that things have to happen that way. It really is.
People listening to this show, guys, thank you for covering this. Thanks for promoting the event next week. And we're not giving up. We're going to keep going in 2026 because what we want to see, remember the power of 169 towns is when people start to stand up. They go to their selectmen, they go to their town council, and they say, we're not accepting this. And you got to demonstrate to us where the unaffordable housing is in my town or your town. Right. Who are they? Where are they working? Explain, and none of them can explain the problem.
Let's hear about this event one more time for listeners that jumped in after the break.
Yeah, so for those of you in the area, whether you're in Coventry, Bolton, Mansfield, Willimantic, we are having an event on December 17th at the Mansfield Library in the Buchanan Center. It's going to start at 6 p.m. Seating is very limited. You can go on to Facebook. You can find Bowman for Mansfield. I'm going to put some information up there on it, a way to kind of RSVP because we only can have 56 people in there, and I think it's going to fill up really quickly because a lot of people in these small rural towns are really concerned about what this is going to do to their community.
It's nonpartisan.
This is nonpartisan.
Not a Republican, Democrat. Nope. This is a private property issue that affects every voter, unaffiliated. So you're not hearing some political ideology. You're hearing debate, discussions of other states like New York State, homeowners, learning about it and then learning what to do about it. And that's the key. Empower people to start taking action.
Correct.
And earlier in the show, for those of you that were not tuning in, we had the keynote speaker for Wednesday night's presentation, Betsy McCaughey, on with us. She was the former lieutenant governor from New York. She's also a news host on Newsmax.
Correct.
And she will be providing us with some insight into Housing Bill 8002 on Wednesday night.
Yes. Yep.
Will you be available on your Facebook page?
Yeah, we'll be able to put some information up on there.
We'll get it out there on social
media. We'll make sure that people can We'll
have more events, right there. And the idea is to make a series, more engagement with people, more education. You know, guys, we have a saying together. Aaron and I walk around and say, values unite, issues divide. And there's no reason that we can't have a civil discourse about legitimate policy differences. We can be civil, but ultimately it comes down to your individual freedom. You work your whole life to buy a property and then own it, or maybe your grandparents going to come to you, a generational thing, and suddenly you see that value wiped out by somebody, I would say perhaps maybe well-intentioned, but remember the key, when they can't, Chris, describe the problem they're solving, you know there's something wrong here.
Yep.
I mean, you're not going to take a shot or a treatment from a doctor when he goes, doctor, what exactly are we fixing here?
Yeah.
And they can't answer
it.
Right.
No, they can't answer it. Yep.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about with this. I mean, not only just the rights that are being stripped from the towns, but we also have the environmental impact. We, haven't even touched the surface on that. What is all the added asphalt and roof, and where's all that storm water going to run off to? Yep. And is it going to go into the local rivers, and how is that going to be handled and mediated with all the stuff that's put on the roads?
That, some of the land that they're looking at as developable could even be state forest.
Right.
I mean, unless like there's specific easements where they're saying, okay, this is not land that will be considered, but they want each town in Connecticut to produce a list of what land we're willing to develop. And if that falls under something like in Scotland, two of the biggest parcels of land are the Mohegan State Forest and the Bass Farm that was the development rights were sold to the state decades ago.
And folks, there's no infrastructure, i.e. sewers, utilities, underground, right? How do you get there from here and back? It's so The reason it has been developed is it's not attractive land for development.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And guys, everyone listening, I want you to think about this a minute. If the state took $1.7 billion last year and said, I have an idea, and this is, you hear these in interviews and in books written, interview people across the country, they said is instead of $1.7 billion for illegal immigrants, why aren't you spending it on our folks here? So think about it. If we had, remember I said trade, not aid? So we said, tell you what, you qualify, we're going to help you with your first mortgage. We're going to go to the bank and say, we'll pay for the deposit, and we'll sort of give you a guarantee. You got to pay it back over time, but we're going to sponsor home ownership.
Right.
And we're going to help you make it affordable. Okay, that $1.7 billion could have been spent on our own people in Connecticut who are working hard. The people have to compete with an illegal immigrant who's willing to work for less under the table. So this insidious problem, that $1.7 million could have solved, I would say,
Billion.
could have solved this problem. $1.7 billion could have solved it.
Absolutely.
All right, we have about 10 minutes left in our show here, so do you have anything else you want to contribute right now on 8002, or do you want to start talking about another topic here that I
Sure.
think you might be interested in? So it does kind of tie into this. It does kind of relate to this, and this is something that we talked about a little bit last night at a function that the three of us were
Yeah.
at.
Chris, the only thing I'd say in closing on this, folks,
Go ahead.
notify your friends, get people. If there's any issue in the last few years that affects you now personally in your community, you always used to say, well, we're east, right, of the river.
Right.
They're over there in Hartford. This is coming to you, mandated. And the people you voted for thinking they could represent and help you, in many cases they can't. They're not willing to pay the political capital to say no to Hartford. So get involved. You're going to be hearing more about it. Thanks. I just wanted to get people fired up on that.
Great.
So one thing that I really started following several months ago in kind of national level news, but really is kind of in certain circles taken off in the past few weeks, but really hasn't been grabbed, I feel, by mainstream media as much as it should have, is some of the uncovering of the fraud that we're seeing related to not only state Medicaid programs, such as what's going on in Minnesota right now. We're now seeing that there's problems unfolding with their housing programs. With the big one was Feeding the Future, and it was food benefits where they were providing phantom meals, and millions of dollars was being reimbursed to these nonprofit organizations in Minnesota, claiming there was one that I read about, a small town, Pelican River, and this is how absurd some of this fraud has been. Pelican River has a population, including all the children, of about 2,500 people. The claim by this nonprofit was they were serving 6,000 meals a day, 7 days a week, and took in like $24 million of COVID funding as part of these SNAP benefit programs.
Did you hear how the FBI peeled this?
Oh, yeah.
So
go ahead.
They asked people who run these programs, what would this look like? And you'd say, oh, look, you'd have PPE, you'd have plastic, you'd have trucks, right? Catering dishes, tables, chairs. So there'd be a lot of moving parts going around. Yeah, feeding that many people a day, it's like a big operation.
Right.
Of course,
so they actually walked around the streets asking residents if they had seen such trucks. They'd see big bags at the dumpster of all this stuff. No, nothing here. Apparently, as they asked people, many people laughed at them. Said, you're serious? Of course not. So to your point, when you throw in the fact that they intimidated the government people by calling them, saying, we will call the racist, we'll say you're racist, as a bludgeon to keep quiet.
Well, they did. They actually sued the Minnesota Department of Education claiming allegations of discrimination.
Right.
So you're talking about direct intimidation, preventing now future auditing of these nonprofit organizations.
Well, Chris,
they're
direct
intimidating it to the
intimidation.
point. Yeah.
Aaron, what gave the currency to the threat is a certain side of the aisle said, we're going to make this claim real. And so they literally stopped because someone would threaten, right, to do it. So as soon as someone knows the threat is credible and that everyone will believe that charge without any evidence, it becomes valuable. And they created themselves this sort of bludgeon they were able to use. But the
Absolutely.
scale of it-
The scale of it is unprecedented.
It's amazing. And then you have Omar on TV.
Ilhan Omar.
Ilhan Omar. You have Tampon Tim on there, all saying everything's great, nothing to see here. You know, there's very little fraud. And she was on, I don't know, Wake Up America or whatever it was. And she's, as they do, they spin it. Well, there's Somalian people that have come here that became citizens. I think like 85% of the population are U.S. citizens, and it affects them too. Well, I find it hard to believe that you have such a small population of illegal immigrants that are here that were able to orchestrate something this massive and that amount of money. And the typical nothing to see here, look over there. It's unreal.
I think that there's a clear indication, and one thing that I want to point out is that when they're talking about the $1 billion in fraud, that's what they've now prosecuted.
Right.
There is still a lot more out there that they're looking at. There's a whole nother nutritional program nonprofit that they think, is hundreds of millions of dollars worth of fraud. Housing is now showing fraud in this. The autism programs. If you haven't looked into the autism programs in Minnesota, in a 5-year period of time, they went from funded at a rate of about $2.4 million to over $100 million, and the number of autism centers went up by like 3,000%.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In less than 5 years.
Well, and Chris, people wonder, how do we get here? Again, like we were talking about the housing bill. And when you realize we had black holes in the Treasury where money was going where they didn't even log who it was for or what it was for, and you see for every dollar spent in these programs, and I hate to say it because it's a generalization, but generally what I'm about to say is true, assume for every dollar spent, it's like 40 cents is fraud, maybe 50 cents.
Sure.
So the inflation, the amount of money being required is funding fraud.
Right.
And some of that, my friends, has flowing back into political organizations to use to regain office and keep covering up this stuff. So there's a big circle going on here.
Well, this is the nonprofit industrial complex at work.
Right.
Like it's self-fulfilling in that the nonprofits get money from their chosen designated legislators. The legislators continue to fund those nonprofits. Those nonprofits now form political action committees that help to keep those legislators reelected time and time again. These are the situations we're seeing all over.
And I'm just glad that in Minnesota that the feds got involved, because that's the only organization that would have had the structure to go ahead and go after that. But don't think that something like this isn't happening in Connecticut. Go ahead and look at the CEOs, look at the board members of the nonprofits that are getting money from our state government. Go ahead and look at the last names, because a lot of them match up with our elected representatives.
Yeah,
it's
interesting.
Just the way it is.
It's weird how that happens,
not the way
right?
it ought to be.
Yep. Now, I'm going to bring up one that's a little bit closer to home now, because this one is just breaking within this past week. Have you heard about Maine and the Medicaid fraud in Maine that's starting to show up now?
I've heard a little bit about it.
Maine also, and not to pick on just one community, but Maine, it happened to come up as I was researching, also has a fairly substantial Somali community.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Diaspora, Somali community. One of these residents of Maine from the diaspora Somali community is a physician who is now being looked at and investigated by the FBI for fraud. He also, in 2024, ran to be the president of a small area of Somalia that's called Jubaland, which is right on the Kenya border.
Okay.
He actually bragged about funneling money to Somali freedom fighters for the purchase of weapons and ammunition while he's running nonprofits in Maine.
Jeez.
His name is Dr. Abdul Ali, and he's the executive director of Gateway Community Services, which is a health services contractor. This is Maine Care is the Medicaid program that pays into this, and they said that between 2017 and 2018, Gateway was overpaid about $750,000. Now you jump forward to 2019 to 2024, and COVID money kicks this fraud into high gear, and now all of a sudden he's raking in $22.8 million in fraudulent claims that a whistleblower is making, which says that there was people that came onto the payroll that were trained never met with a single client, were given $2,000 bonuses, and then a month later were never working there again. All right? There was other situations where they actually falsified tracking software showing where workers were supposed to be meeting with clients to show false meeting arrangements.
Jeez.
Like, this is concerted efforts to defraud our governments and defraud taxpayer money. Like, we need to really, like you said, look into this in every single one of our states.
Oh, yeah.
Because this has been the way that money has just flown from that ARPA funding right to all these nonprofit
We call it the
organizations.
ARPA ATM.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just pet in our town, Chris. We call it pet projects.
Yeah.
They're just no visibility, no accountability. Well, thank you for covering these things.
Yeah.
So this is a story that still is breaking. We'll continue some of this conversation next week. We are coming to the top of the hour here. We're going to be done with our show in just a minute. So I want to take a quick thank you to my co-host Curtis Ayler here this afternoon and our two State Central representatives who joined us this afternoon in studio, Aaron Bowman and Chris Coyle. Thank you both so much for joining us. We have time for one more question here. You ready for a question, Curtis?
I want to get this one right.
Okay. What department store is responsible for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
Oh my goodness! What department store?
There's one.
Oh wow!
department store.
I'm getting some cheaters over here, but I'll take it. I'll take it. If you might win, you might lose, but you always cheat. That's what I've been told in games. So I think I saw the word Macy's.
No.
Oh
Woolworths.
no!
Woolworths?
Oh, that was good guesses,
Yeah.
though. I like those. Montgomery Ward.
Oh,
there we
that's
go.
right.
Wow.
Okay.
Very close.
Listen,
There we go.
I
There
just
we
saw
go.
that on TV
Yeah,
too.
Montgomery Ward. 1939, they commissioned this book to be written because before that they had given out coloring books to their
Right,
customers
right.
for free, and they wanted to give out something different in 1939, so they came up with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Wow.
We will be back next Thursday, 3 to 4 p.m. again. This has been Right Now with Chris Reddy, Curtis Ayler, our special guests Aaron and Chris, 1400 AM, 95.3 FM, WILI.